you for that one. When I get in, I'll have a little okay.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Moved by Councillor Hudson, second by Councillor Scapanel. Resolved that the special meeting commence at the hour of 7 p.m. and be it further resolved that Council acknowledges that we are meeting on the Robinson Superior Treaty area on lands that have been traditionally used by several Indigenous nations. But we'd like to pay special recognition to our closest Indigenous neighbors, the communities of Bictagon, Nishnabeg, and Pic-Mobert First Nations. We wish to recognize the long history of the First Nations and Métis people in our region traditionally and show respect to them today. All in favor? Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Seeing none, we move the approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Scapanello, second by Councillor Hudson. Resolved that the agenda be approved as circulated. All in favor? There are no delegations or presentations. Therefore, we'll move to the business of the draft 2019 budget. Do we?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have for you a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the 2019 proposed budget. Council has already seen the majority of this. It was presented at our original budget meeting, and there are just a couple of amendments to it. For a lot of the pie charts and other charts, they're on the back wall that will show you in a little more detail, a little larger than a screenshot. So our approach to the budget was balance the community needs and be accountable to the taxpayers. We want to try and maintain what we have where possible and practical, both service levels and our infrastructure. We recognize that revenues are heavily dependent on the residential property taxes and OMPF funding. We must be aware of the provincial downloading that seems imminent and decreasing grant revenues in 2020 and beyond. We can expect some adjustments to our OMPF funding in 2020. We just don't know what that is. We need to be aware of reviewing municipal operating costs and identify efficiencies where possible, and be aware of planning for aging infrastructure and financing deficits. Our asset management plan is well underway and transferred to reserves and reserve funds. So the budget process, municipalities exist under the mandate of the province and the Municipal Act and a variety of other provincial acts. The province requires that we prepare a budget, and we cannot operate at a deficit. This meeting will explain how the town is financed and how your tax dollars are applied. So the key highlights of this budget are the proposed levy increase is $218,207.27. Staffing since 2018 has increased by 2.5 positions. All vacant positions are reviewed when vacancies occur. One of the full-time positions is funded for a 2-year term. All the costs have been adjusted for staff on, all salary budgets have been adjusted for staff on leave or vacant positions. And we continue with cross-training in various departments. We have an increased capital contribution to reserve and reserve funds, and the ski hill was not operational during the 2018-19 season, so that has an impact on our budget for 2019. And you'll see some variances between 18 and 19 and 19 and 20 as a result of that. Other major variances are decisions by council. The LUP offered a purchase that council approved. Council approved hiring a firm to oversee the management of the skate park. And we also are required to update our health and safety policies. So the township has 4 sources of revenue. Taxation is our primary one, including payment in lieu of taxes, conditional and unconditional grants, user fees, permits, licenses, and fines, and other revenues such as penalty and interest, rents, sale of land, etc. So the main sources of revenue consist of 2 main components: taxation, the tax base. The assessed value of property is determined by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. There seems to be some misinformation that we have anything to do with that, and we don't. That's directly driven by MPAC. The tax rates, the municipal and school, the municipality is set by town council, and the school is set by the province. Tax ratios define the municipal tax rate of each property class in relation to the residential tax ratio of 1. Council approves the tax ratios by bylaw. We have not seen a change in our tax ratios in many, many years. We are one of the few municipalities in Ontario that are at the range of fairness, so there's no reason for us to move them. And there's very little movement allowed for us anyway. Property tax rates are set by council based on the estimated revenue needed to operate and maintain the town's services and its infrastructure. Property taxes are subject to provincial regulations. Levy restrictions are hard capping for the multi-residential, commercial, and industrial property classes, and currently we are not subject to any restrictions. For assessment, MPAC is responsible for determining property assessment valuations based on policies stipulated in the Assessment Act. The Act was amended in 2007. Properties are valued every 4 years, beginning with the 2009 tax year. 2007 was the first year of a 4-year cycle, and assessment increases are phased over the 4-year period. Assessment decreases, however, are immediate. Assessment for 2019 is increased from 2018. It's the 3rd year in the cycle and includes any new developments. Currently, we have none. User fees. The township has some discretion to determine the services for which it will charge a fee. Some examples of fees charged are arena rental fees, landfill site tipping fees, airport landing fees, building permits, zoning applications. User fees are reviewed annually and approved by council by bylaw. License permits and fines. So the revenues under this category include lottery licenses and building permits. Some of these are broke down the way they are because it's a requirement of the province on how we report them. As far as grants go, we have conditional and unconditional grants that can be both from the provincial and federal governments and other funding bodies. Our main unconditional grant is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, OMPF. We received 1.7 in 2019, which was unchanged from 2018, but again, it is under review for 2020 by the province. The township also receives an annual conditional capital grant which fund various road, water, and construction projects. So in 2019, we received $251,615 from the federal gas tax. Our annual allocation is only $117,000. This year there was a one-time top-up fee of $134,000. We have no idea if that will continue. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Formula-Based Funding, which is commonly known as OCEF, if you hear that acronym around. And this year we received $213,792. We apply for as many special project grants as possible, and we just want to make sure that if we apply for them, we actually have the capacity to carry out the project should we be granted the funding. So some of these include employment grants. We hire our summer students with employment grants, accessibility grants. We've applied for that twice in the last couple of years and have been successful both times. One paid for alterations at the new seniors complex, and the other one helped fund the renovations in the front of this building. Community Transportation Grant. This is the MyRide vehicle and a driver. We have partnered with Santé Manitowoc Health on this, and we should be issuing the purchase order any day now for that vehicle as soon as we get confirmation from the Ministry of Transportation. Funding for special projects. The aquaculture project was funded through this, the study. And Mature Capital Repairs received funding in 2018 for upgrades to the water treatment plant, and those upgrades are currently underway. So here's your budget summary. There's another slide with a little more detail. So the estimated revenues, the revenue fund transfers to capital are $882,000. The revenue fund contributions to reserves is $682,000. And we're going to be raising from taxes or payment in lieu $4,113,670. This was asked for at the budget deliberations, so I've added some columns here, and this one is actually on the back wall. So the net program cost for this year is $4,113,000. Last year it was $3,895,000. So we have actually increased the levy, which is the amount that we're raising from taxes this year, $218,207. Where does the money come from? These are the revenue sources. General government, which is including taxation, is 68%, and of course that's our largest component. Building 5, community services 4, public works 22, and the airport 2. Protective services and health services and protective services bring in very little revenue, so it's not enough to hit the radar and generate a number. So revenue by source is pretty even. We receive 50% of our revenues from taxation, 25% through grants, and 25% through additional user fees. Expenses and expenditures, 3 types of municipal accessibility grants: operating, capital, and reserve fund contributions. The broad categories of the grants are controllable, example, or broad categories of expenditures, controllable, example, administration, fire, public works, community center. Uncontrollable are the OPP, the health unit, DSAB, ambulance. They give us their levy and we are required to pay it. There's no negotiation. They have their boards and they set their own budgets and their own parameters and just notify what our share of that budget will be. We do currently have long-term debt. For any major project, council always has the discretion of incurring debt, which would be a debenture, which is the municipal term for a loan, or pay-as-you-go. Long-term debt repayment is part of the current operational budget, and we currently have 1 debenture issued. The 2019 payment is $186,000. There's 1 more installment in 2020 of $90,761, and then that debenture will be complete. So operating expenses, general government 25, airport 2, protective services includes OPP, which is why that number looks a little high, 13, public works 36, health 2, and community services and library is at 17. Where does it go? Many of our costs are determined by other boards, and I've outlined them for you, the 2017, 18, 19 costs, and you'll see how the police have gone down for several years. They're now on the incline again, so 451 to 458. We can continue to see that number go up from here on in. It's unlikely that it will start to go down again. Social services, health unit, the mayor has talked to council about possible increases in the health unit, ambulance, and MPAC. Revenues, we saw an increase in 2018 and the same payment for 2019 for our OMPF funding. So there's been no change 18 to 19, and the gas tax funding has increased in 2019 as a result of a one-time top-up. So the net impact to over 18 to 19 is $114,000 in those costs. Where does the money go? A large majority of our budget is spent on salaries and benefits and hydro, heat, and propane. So 2018, 2.9 million, 2019, 3.2 million. So those components alone comprise of 40% of our budget. It's anticipated that we're going to spend $3.2 million on capital this year. That's not all going to come out of the current year's budget. Some of it has already been put into reserve funds in prior years. Some will be paid from reserve funds, and others, such as the waterworks, is a grant, and we will receive that money as the project proceeds. Here's a tax rate summary for you that shows you, just based on assessment, what your total tax rate would be, increases or reductions compared to the 2018 tax rates. So on a residential property, for example, if you had an assessed value of $50,000 and it didn't change from 18 to 19, your taxes last year would have been $3,671. This budget will propose a tax levy of $3,707, which is 0.97% of an increase, $29. The levy change for the municipal share is $29. The education, however, has a reduction, so the net impact to that homeowner would only be $8.44. There are other examples there so that you get a feel of what the increases or decreases are going to be for each property class based on assessment. This does not, and it's important to note, does not take into consideration any increase in assessment. Reserves and reserve funds. Reserves are a critical component of the township's long-term financial plan. It provides financing of capital assets. Building of reserve funds is primarily accomplished through the allocation of annual operating surpluses. We currently have 2 bylaws that when we have a surplus at year end, that it's split 50-50 between 2 reserve funds. The operational budget allocations to sustain asset management strategies. In 2019, the operating budget allocates $682,000 to reserve and reserve funds. Much of this was previously approved by resolutions. An example of that is the Northern Broadband revenues and the Community Wellbeing Fund revenues already have resolutions as to where those monies will go. So our current economic situation, Council has the difficult task of balancing the needs of the community and maintaining acceptable levels of service. We have to make every effort to strengthen the local economy and provide fairness in taxation and value for the service to our residents. OPP costs are uncontrollable and are reconciled 2 years later. We now see that that is on the rise. Provincial downloading and regulatory responsibilities sometimes lead to uncertainty, and that's what we feel we might be facing in 2020. Escalating operating costs, hydro, heat, salaries. We will be renegotiating our union contract in 2020, and aging infrastructure. So that's my presentation. If anybody has any questions.
We've pretty well gone over this before, but are there any questions from any of the councillors? Seeing none, thank you very much. I'll start with the first bylaw. Moved by Councillor Hudson, second by Councillor Scampanello, being a bylaw to adopt the estimates of the sums required during the year 2019 for general purposes of the Corporation of the Township of Manitowoc, and to repeal bylaw number 2018-11 be read a first and second time. Any discussion? Or seeing none. And further be read a third time, passed and numbered as bylaw number 2019-12. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Scampanella, seconded by Councillor Hudson, being a bylaw to provide the adoption of the tax rates and to further provide for penalty and interest in default of payment thereof for 2019, and to repeal bylaw number 2018-12, be read at first and second time. Any discussion? Seeing none. And further be read a third time, passed and numbered as bylaw number 2019-13. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Scampanella, being a bylaw to set the 2019 transition ratio and set rate reductions for prescribed properties subclasses, and to repeal bylaw number 2018-13, be read at first and second time. Discussion. Seeing none. And further be read a third time, passed and numbered as bylaw number 2019-14. All in favor? There is no closed session, so we'll move to moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Rolla, resolved that the special meeting adjourn at the hour of 7:21. All in favor?